This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com. WCW is always a popular topic on this channel, and one of their big shows in the 90s that was added when the period was booming, the Attitude, Monday Night Wars era period was booming, was WCW Thunder on TBS. And this show was actually canceled this week in 2001. So I'm going to review the Wrestling Observer report on why it was canceled. Of course, the entire WCW was sold less than a year after this cancellation. So let's get into it. The first sign of cutbacks in WCW were evident all the way back in October 99 with Thunder cutting down on their production values. And now, August 20th, 2000, they have canceled Thunder. Oh my God, can you guys believe this was 23 years ago? The announcement was made by Brad Siegel to the wrestlers at the New Blood Rising pay-per-view that's starting October 23rd in Little Rock, Arkansas. WCW will be cutting down one TV taping a week. I guess there was two scenarios laid out. They could start one. Oh, I guess they're just canceling the tapings. Okay, as Piper's saying hello down there. They didn't actually cancel the show. They canceled the tapings. So here's the scenario. They could start 1 hour before Nitro, tape an hour of Thunder, then tape the final hour after Nitro. Or they can tape the whole thing after Nitro. So interesting. This was the first sign of cutbacks. Meltzer brings up that this situation has a lot of negatives, but will greatly save on production costs, as well as building expenses. They don't have to rent two buildings. They've been drawing very poorly lately, with advances at this point also being very bad. The other thing he brings up, which was a factor as WCW went towards its death, was the longer tapings make it more difficult to get good crowd reactions because the crowd's sitting there for so long. And it gets burnt out. They also bring up that in the end, to keep crowds hot and to keep them there through the whole show, they would have Hulk Hogan wrestle often at the end of the TV tapings, back when they were doing those long Superstars and Challenges tapings. But he mentions at this point they don't have a Hulk Hogan level star. I mean, I would argue Goldberg could have been it. Apparently, Little Rock, Arkansas was the first show they did this after the famous Australia tour. Wonder if that was the one where my buddy Juventud Guerrera went crazy on angel dust, according to reports. Apparently, WCW has canceled house shows at this point as well. They're only running 5 shows a month and a pay-per-view. The decision was made to cancel all house shows after the ones up to this point are completed, with the exception of foreign promoters, as the foreign promotions were still doing good at this point. Apparently, WCW is also cutting back on pyro. There was only one big screen instead of 3, obviously cutting back on production people to set that type of stuff up. Far less elaborate ring entrances. And a lot of big name wrestlers have been dropped from their contract. And a lot of these big name wrestlers, most of them actually, no further negotiations have been done to renew their contracts. Hello, Maurice from Cheap Heat Productions. So that's very interesting. It's funny because at this point in 2000, August 2000, I don't think anyone expected that within a year WCW would be fully out of business. because they always had lots of ups and downs. But looking into it, at this point, they were cutting costs, and sadly, they still had a lot of people under contract that weren't worth it, and the creative just got worse and worse and worse. Honestly, the last 2 years of creative, 2 to 3 years of creative in WCW were brutal. However, I still prefer to watch WCW than today's wrestling, but maybe that's because I was a kid back then. So I won't hate on today's too much. I think maybe I think wrestling has just developed into something totally different these days. I mean, the end of WCW, there was moments where there was very little wrestling and lots of horrible gimmicks, and the stuff when they were all talking about WCW sucks. That was an angle at one point. Like the wrestlers and people within WCW on camera were talking about how crappy the product was. That was pretty bad. But now WWE has so many of these long and boring promos, and there's just so much today that I don't find entertaining, but I could just have outgrown wrestling. The behind the scenes stuff is still very interesting to me, though. Anyways, I always watch Thunder and Nitro. TBS we did get, so we got to watch Thunder live in Canada. By this time, in the early 90s, we didn't get TBS on basic cable. By the late 90s, we did, but we never got TNT here in Canada, and we still don't to this day, unless you have very special subscription outlets. So we always got the replay of Nitro a few days later on TSN. But I think one of the problems with Thunder, and there is a Kevin Sullivan podcast on Thunder that I will put in the description of this video, is the wrestlers didn't try. They put more of an effort into Nitro, and even the writers didn't try that hard, and they've self-admitted that. So maybe if they had put a greater effort into making Thunder a success, it could have been more a success, because as I said, for instance, for Canada, which was a market that they didn't really tap into, which they could have, we got Thunder live. So for Canadians like me, who was in high school at this point, Thunder was a big show because it was the only WCW show we got live. Raw was the live show always on TSN live. And then we got Nitro. I think it aired at 5 or 6 p.m. the next day on the Tuesday. So we never got Nitro live. Anyways, have a great afternoon.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our